Arts, I love them. Right, here it is. Can you see this?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
And is it moving? No, it is not moving. Is it now
Yes,
shifting?
ma'am.
Yes,
All
ma'am.
right. I think I can stop and then we'll try. All right.
May I start now? Good morning, everyone. So this is the second day of the third International Young Folklorists Conference. Today's session begins with a special keynote address on the topic of reverence, ritual, and the politics of presence in Theyyam. Our speaker for the session is Dr. V.K. Karthika, Assistant Professor, Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, National Institute of Technology, Tiruchirappalli. And our chair for this session is Miss Aaleya Giri ma'am, Assistant Professor of English, Delhi University. I request Aaleya Giri ma'am to take over the session from now.
Thank you, Suvanita. It's an immense pleasure to introduce ma'am. Dr. V.K. Karthika is an assistant professor of English at NIT Tiruchirappalli with a PhD from IFLU, Hyderabad, and an MA gold medalist from Pondicherry University. She also holds a TESOL degree from the University of Leeds. She teaches linguistics, ELT, translation and communication, and guides PhD scholars. Her research spans second language acquisitions, multilingual education, EMI, aviation English, translation studies, SDGs, peace education, and IKS. She has 44 publications, including 31 in Scopus WOS journals, and has delivered over 100 invited lectures. She serves on NCRT's NSTC Language English for NEP 2020 and leads funded research projects and national trainings. I extend a warm welcome to you, ma'am. It's a pleasure to have you on board. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aaleya. Thank you very much. So I'll just quickly thank the organizing team for putting up this program together. It's so fascinating to see the paper titles and the keynote titles and all. I was attending most of the sessions yesterday, some of the paper presentations as well. It was really very enriching kind of an experience. Never stop learning kind of an attitude it sets in the mind, because there are so many things that we still don't know about the indigenous knowledge systems that we are part of. So I express my sincere gratitude in putting up something so meaningful, something so wonderful, with so many youth coming together. Me being part of that, like the inaugural address yesterday, that feels really different, being called as a young folklorist, where I don't belong to the folklorist family in academic terms. And Jolly sir had taken a risk, in fact, by putting me into this star-studded panels of speakers. But I'll try to do justice. And I thank him immensely for giving me an opportunity to present something that I'm working on right now. Not because, as you heard from the bio note, I teach English and my research is largely into the field of English language studies, but I do a little bit of research in cultural studies as well. And that is how we came together. And there are several different threads that connect me with Jolly sir. Other than he being a very humane and very friendly, jolly good fellow in that sense. So thank you very much for having me invited to this lecture. And before we begin with the slide presentation, I'll start sharing the slides, but meanwhile, I'll just tell you a few things about the presentation today. There'll be a few things that I will not be talking about. The 1 hour span is not enough to talk about something as huge as Theyyam. So I'll not talk about certain aspects of Theyyam. I'll only choose very selective kind of aspects about Theyyam. Another thing is about my own connections with the folklore practices that you people were discussing yesterday, or that we were part of the discussions yesterday. Being born into a very conservative, traditional Hindu family, which had every month, or maybe quarterly, annually, and in a sense every month some or other kind of rituals. I was brought up in that fashion, where I listened to a lot of my mythological stories, was part of several rituals, sometimes was a tool for several rituals as well, because they need a young girl for performing certain kind of rites and all. So I was always part of that tradition of having a lot of rituals, listening to a lot of legends, the family legends, the local legends, things like that. Also, I was part of this family worshipping the snakes, and then how the kind of, there was a lot of magic involved in that. Magic, not the literal sense, but a lot of majestic narratives were part of my early childhood. So it all defined a very different me I would see now. And these are all connections that human beings build up from their environment, or imbibe from their environment, and something that just stitches us together. I mean, stitches us together to the fabric of this traditional knowledge systems, or Indian knowledge system. So being part of those rituals, worshipping trees, I think I have lit lamps underneath banyan trees, palm trees, and what you call as devil's tree, Erilam Pala, we say, upon which several deities and yakshis, the female ghosts, they rest upon. So being born and brought up into such kind of a ritualistic space, it always connected me with this aspect of reverence, ritual, and sometimes the secular aspect that was there. So see, as a child, I was not able to understand that, but as I was growing up, I could find a lot of secular undertones within this ritualistic practice, the connection with the ecological environment, I mean, the ecology around us, the connections with the so-called have-nots. When we were kind of patrons for certain rituals, how the powerless became very powerful in the narrative. So these were the things that made me connect with folklore in a very different sense. I think that is my eligibility to speak on this topic today. When I shared the poster that you have prepared, very beautiful one indeed, I shared, and several people from northern part of Kerala called me and asked me about, are you really going to speak about Theyyam? Because I'm not from the northern side of Kerala where this ritual is being performed. So I was actually like, even now somebody's calling from there, because I just shared it and they saw it and they're calling and checking with me whether I'm all right to speak about it. See, why I told you this personal narrative is because Theyyam, I'll show you a video if we get enough time. It's a fascinating performance, and till the time I watched it, it was one of my bucket list thing, if you would call it that way. Last year I went and watched it, and until and unless I watched it, and I didn't sleep for 2 days and was very much present in the place with all the people who are coming for this thing. It's a huge crowd that you would see there, and there are people who belong to different political ideologies, caste, religion, and things like that. But then all of them were together, or their togetherness was largely defined by this idea of Theyyam as a ritual and as a cultural practice. So there was so much into the environment as well. It was not about the majestic performance that I was witnessing, but it's also about the sorority that it builds up in the immediate community where it gets performed. And community is not referring to a particular sect. It's about a community that Theyyam creates on that particular day, or during those days when the performance happened. So these are the this is a prelude that I wanted to give you before we go into it, just to take an anticipatory bail to state that I am not going to talk about different Theyyams. There are over 400 Theyyams. We cannot talk about the nuances of each and everything. I'm not looking at the ecological aspects or the connection of ecology and Theyyam. I am not looking at the gender aspect of it. There is a gender aspect of it that comes within as well. I'm not also looking at the caste principles within Theyyam, but I'll be restricting myself to the concept of reverence, ritual, and the presence in Theyyam, because it is a very huge thing to look at, and it's pretty scary kind of a business to touch upon something as ritual, as a ritual, and then which has a lot of historical connotations as well. I'm slowly unearthing different aspects of Theyyam, just burying myself into different books and videos and documentaries, so on and so forth, and several interviews with the Theyyam artists as well, also the patrons of Theyyam performance as well. So this is an ongoing research, and I'm presenting an excerpt from there. So with that, we will begin. I'll just quickly discuss in the first few slides what is actually Theyyam. I mean, my job becomes very easy because Rishabh Shetty has come up with something called Kantara. So most of you might be familiar with, even if you are not from the from Kerala, you might be familiar with the Panchiruli Theyyam that was presented in Kantara. So it is said that one of the seminal texts in Theyyam is this one. I don't know whether you can see this. This is called Theyya Prapancham by Dr. R.C. Karimpat, and he says that Deivam was the original word, and from which probably the illiteracy or the kind of localized indigenous version of the pronunciation became Theyyam. And the art form is known as Theyyam. Each of them are Theyyams. Each of them are Devams or gods of different, it could be a mythologized ancestor or a god or goddess, like in the popular Hindu pantheon, or a hero or a martyr. Animal spirit, sometimes, you have Pakshi Theyyam, which is the bird Theyyam, Puli, leopard. There are several animals becoming snake. There are several animals or birds becoming the spirits, and then they assume the Theyyam status. And then force of nature. So it's about largely about fertility of the earth. So there are certain gods or goddesses which are symbolic of the force of nature, like Karkidoti and Kanni, Kalichi, Kaliyan. There are several different types. So if we have to talk about them, it's a fascinating thing to go on, and I can go on for several moments, but we will restrict it to the kind of magico-religious functionary that they operate as in the entire narrative. So they become a mediator between the supreme and the earthly. And who are these people who perform Theyyam is also very important. That is where a lot of politics come in, or their presence of politics become very significant. As I said, there are over 400 distinct Theyyam rituals practiced today, and it is in the Malabar side, like in the northern part of Kerala. And this is where I told you who are the practitioners of it, largely by the Dalit community. Not largely, it is conducted by the Dalit communities. They have the right to, portray a unique myth that they have got with specific makeup, different type of steps, choreography, in that sense. The costumes are also very different. So when you look at Theyyam, at first they might look, the facial makeup might look very similar, but it is not like that. For every single drawing, there is meaning. So I was fortunate enough to go close to the artists who are doing this, what we call as mukhatthezhuthu, which means the drawing on or the painting on the face. I wouldn't call it face painting. I don't know why it doesn't come that way. So the painting on the face is quite unique. So each and every single line has a meaning, and if there is a curve there, the meaning changes, the deity changes. So they're very particular about it. They're very trained about it. And initially they used to use only the natural colors and all. Now some changes are becoming. And also I'm not looking at the digital presence and how the digital platforms are modifying the practice, so on and so forth. I'm just restricting it to these three concepts because that is what we can achieve in 45 to 50 minutes time. And then there is a prescribed ritual sequence for every single Theyyam. So what Kadivanur Veeran does will be very different from Vetekurumagan or some other kind of Theyyam that comes. The way they perform. The Theyyams that come in the morning will be very different from the Theyyams that come at night. The women Theyyam, and there are several different aspects to it. It's very intriguing and interesting to look at the inclusivity part of it. What I have used here is a translation of a statement by Vishnu Murthy Theyyam, which is one incarnation of or which is one Theyyam based on the god Vishnu. Again, a Savarna god, and then they translate it as Vishnu Murthy Theyyam in their performance spectrum. So the Vishnumurti Theyyam talks to the Mappila Theyyam. Mappila was a word that we used the earlier times in Kerala. It referred to the Muslim community. So a Mappila is a Muslim. So in a Juma Masjid, this was being performed. And then the Vishnumurti Theyyam says this: are we not one and the same? Like petals of a single flower, we exist. Your azan should seep deep into my ears. In times when earth and air tremble in unspoken fear, we move and act carrying the realization that all, including living and the lifeless, are one. So there's a huge principle of unity that is being stated here. And we need to also, from here I can digress and go somewhere, so I'm trying to restrict it. Still, the origins of Mappila Theyyam are also very interesting. They are wronged Muslims. So Muslims who were subjected to something, who were subjected to some kind of violence, some kind of laws, they became the Theyyams. So just getting a kind of, it's not for revenge in that direct sense. It's not avenging either. It's just like they are wronged. You think about the usual ghost narratives and all. Somebody is killed and there is some kind of injustice done to that person, and then the person reincarnates or come back to life or whatsoever. So similarly, Mappila Theyyams are also those Muslims. These are all myths, okay? Muslims who were wronged and they came up, or they just emerged as a Theyyam, not to seek vengeance, but to bless the community. So it's a very intriguing and fascinating kind of inclusivity principle that works there, or equality or equity principle that works there, which is stressing on the cultural syncretism and religious harmony that should ideally exist in any societies. Of course, there is challenging of the traditional upper caste dominance in temple rituals, because this kind of crisscrossing cannot be seen in many temples as such, because there are certain castes which were not permitted to access within the Hindu community itself. Now that caste discrimination might not be there. I can only say might not be there. And the religious division is there. If somebody knows that, see, look at the case of Yeshudas, the most popular singer. He is not allowed to go into Guruvayur temple because he's a Christian, and people know that he's a Christian. There are several Christians visiting Guruvayur temple who are not very popular. So those kind of divides or divisions are not present in the case of Theyyam. So there is no religious binaries. There's no caste system existing when Theyyam gets performed. And we need to also understand that there are several different facets of Theyyam as well. For example, there are friendly Theyyams, there are friends, Theyyams as friends. So Vishnumurti Theyyam always goes with Rakta Chamundi. So they are like in pairs, they are friends. So friends, Theyyams who are friends, also they are very friendly to the people as well. At the same time, there are certain Theyyams which are really fierce, which scares people. And I remember we were all running away when one particular Theyyam was coming. People warned us, or through the mic they announced that people have to be very careful because there is fire around and the Theyyam comes very close in that possession state. So people just ran away from where they are when the Theyyam approaches. So such fierce deities are also there. The point is the accessibility. So unlike the past, the probably the dark history where certain people didn't have access, or certain public didn't have access to the Savarna gods. There was an alternative formation that came up uh, through the concept of accessible gods. So Theyyams are accessible gods who are approachable, who can hug you. They're not human gods, or what is that called? The god men or god women. They're not that, but they are the people whom you can uh, go close to, and then articulate your fears and anxieties. And sometimes, they give prophecies as well, very disturbing kind of prophecies as well. So there is a sacred presence that we talk about when we think about Theyyam, and it all Theyyams embody the physical presence of the deity. So there is a not a song, but there is a literature piece that they will use to invoke the presence. So there are places like groves, what we call as kava, the groves, the small little forest pieces that we have there, and there is no presence of God all through the year until and unless the Theyyam performance happens. So when the person starts getting the makeup, the person goes and requests for that sacredness, some kind of an invocation. And once that comes, it moves from one object to the other. So there is a lot of assemblages that is happening. So the person goes, prays for it, the person gets it, and then finally it comes to the anklet, it comes to the fingers, it comes to the sword, sacred sword. So the god's presence is situated in various different places. The performer actually does not act. We cannot see it as act, but it is being. So it's a possession state where the person is becoming something. So becoming the god, and then devotees come and seek blessings, healing, justice, oracles. It's very interesting how they take it so seriously. And as I said, just revising it once again, just to be on the same page. There are the Hindu gods like forms of Shiva, Bhadrakali, Vishnu, so on and so forth. And also there are folk traditions. These are really, really fascinating ones. And the stories are never ending. Loads of stories. Even though we say that there are 400 Theyyams, they're not just 400 stories. There are several different stories related to them. So in folk traditions, there are local heroes, like as I said, Kadivanur Veeran, martyrs like Vetakurumagan, and victims of caste injustice are also there. There are several people, just like the case of Mappila Theyyam, the religious binary, and people get killed and all. Women wronged and later deified. Some women who were just violated for them being scholars, or they wanted to learn. So there are several different types of oppressions that generated in the emergence of a god. It's a very fascinating kind of narrative if you look at it that way, from that kind of a subaltern perspective. And there is, of course, a social irony. So just look at the picture, the person, what he's holding is a mirror. So this is the final stage. Once they get the invocation done, they start the facial makeup. And eventually they are becoming the god. So there is a process of becoming the god. And the final moment, the culmination of being the god happens, or being possessed happens, when the person looks into the mirror. For me, that was really like very significant, because you have to look at yourself to know that you're God and you are capable of being a god. There are several such interpretations that are possible, and it's only after looking at the mirror, stare at it for several times. I literally witnessed it, so it's so intimate into my system. So they look at it, they just are very focused on it, and at one point they just keep it down, and then they go in a possession state there. Something which is spectacular to witness. And when you think about the performers, they are largely members of marginalized communities. I met some auto drivers, some manual workers, some laborers, some farmers, and the young generation who are coming up as Theyyams. They work as software engineers in Bangalore. But during this season, now the Theyyam season has started. So if somebody wants to go and watch. Yes, these are the months, March, April, May. You can go and watch it. I think up to the first 2 weeks of June, it should be there. So these educated people, the new generation ones, they're also very particular about continuing the legacy of them. Many of them, I'm not saying all of them, but many of them. The problems are so many. The kind of issues that they face are several. It's very sad as well. The sad story of God we have to narrate, and I'm not going to do that. It's very emotionally packed kind of a story when we have to narrate, because if I get the time, I'll show you the video. You might have a question: how do they survive the fire? Actually, they don't survive the fire. At the end of it, they're all wounded. They're all struggling for the rest of the few months, and usually they pass away at an early age. So it's a very sad story if you look at it. Again, emphasizing what I would call as the social irony, another aspect of social irony. So as they are from marginalized communities who historically were denied of several opportunities, several notions of accessibility. For a brief season of this ritual, they are respected as the divine. They are considered as the divine. So there is a translation happening in terms of their power. So upper caste devotees actually come with folded hands and stand before them, asking them for suggestions and all. So the particular Brahmin household to which I went to see the Peringaliyattam, which is a sequence of Theyyam performance, which happens only once in 12 years. So last year I watched that. Around 40 Theyyams came over 48 hours without any stop. So nobody slept there basically, and the household which are the patrons of it should cater to the needs of the people who come there as guests, and it's such a kind of unity that you can see there in the space. So all people who are there with some kind of belief in the practice of Theyyam. They bow before the Theyyam actually. And therefore, there is a temporary kind of inversion in the caste hierarchy is something that I would like to mention. So it is actually something about asserting the equality principle there through this ritual. So because this ritual exists, there is a momentary kind of equality that happens, and it permits some kind of direct dialogue with the dominant caste and some kind of critical moral questioning, which I heard. I don't want to share it right now, but some very important moral questioning that the gods can do at that point, an assertion of their own dignity. These are some of the factors that I actually notice there. The space, like many other rituals, might be permitting this. I'm not very sure about it, but the other rituals that I was part of, it didn't have this much dialogue space. So Theyyam is quite unique in that aspect as well. Not for this temporary kind of inversion of hierarchy and establishment of unity principle or inclusivity concerns being quite normalized at that point of time. But the moral questioning is also very significant. They can ask questions which can stay. The questions will stay, right? Theyyam will fade away after the possession stage is over, but the questions will loom large there. That was something very interesting that I have witnessed. These are not research questions. You can see they are yes or no kind of questions, which are just serving as guiding principles for us to navigate through the rest of the presentation. Is it merely a ritual performance? Is it a political reconfiguration of presence? The first one, you might have had your answer now itself. We look at the second part of the question right now. I would like to use Nancy Fraser's concept of counterpublics here. You might be familiar with it, the parallel discursive universe, right? And why should there be a parallel discursive arena when we think about it? Because there is a dominant discourse practice in which people are not invited to participate, or they are forcefully evaded from that. They have to just evade themselves away or just excuse themselves out of that dominant discourse owing to XYZ reasons. So that is where the counter publics become created. These are the spaces where subordinated or subjugated kind of social classes can actually. So when you think about the social identity theory as such, there is an in-group and an out-group, if you look at it. So there is something that connects people together as an in-group one, and anybody who doesn't belong to that one becomes the out-group, right? So that social identity theory also functions here in a subtle way, where such kind of subordinated social groups actually form oppositional interpretations, because they have their own ideas and ideologies to articulate. They're not part of this dominant public, which discuss their which discuss things in their own manner. So there are oppositional kind of interpretations possible, pretty post-colonial in that aspect if you look at it, and they circulate the counter discourses. So this counter publics allows people to form a different kind of grouping in a sense, and the alternative identities are getting constructed because just facilitates that kind of a dialogic interaction, and they emerge in response to, as I said, the exclusion from the dominant public sphere. And sometimes the silence can be, silence can be the kind of language that they choose, and sometimes agitation. So how the counter publics react is something very interesting as well. Here, the counter publics formation is not in a liberal radical sense, but it is radical, but very much rooted in the ritual. So the ritual is something that gives them the counter public status. So that they can articulate things, they can question the moral and ethical values of a society. They can ask several questions about my blood being the same color of yours, and then why are we different? There are several critical, very radical kind of questions being asked by different Theyyams, and that is how the counter publics, a ritualistic kind of counter publics, get formed in that Theyyam sphere. So that's what I said. It's a ritualized counter public space, and the marginalized bodies now become the sacred center of focus. Everybody looks at them, everybody respects them, and the aspect of reverence or the kind of bhakti that comes there, in fact, unsettles the kind of social hierarchy. The ones who are on the top of the ladder comes down, and the ones who are down there at the bottom level of the ladder goes up. So this kind of a transition is very interesting, and it is the ritual, it is the myth that permits them to assume this authority, even though it is sponsored by the upper class community. They have to respect this. It works like there is a lot of carnivalesque principle working in that as well, the Bhaktin's notion. I'm not going deep into that. So the performance actually produces some kind of visibility, not some kind of visibility, but very accurate kind of visibility, audibility, and authority and legitimacy for these lower caste people who otherwise are quite unnoticed, and their identity is quite strict to they being the Theyyam. But you will see that, eventually when I talk, you will see that it's a very transitional kind of phase. It's very transient. It doesn't stay for so long. That kind of a status quo won't stay for so long. So in that sense, this devotional or ritual space becomes a political space where different identities are articulated in different ways. So the counter publics, ritualistic counter publics creation itself is a very strong articulation of their identity and the claims or the questioning that they want to articulate. So it's very interesting kind of a space where several identities are negotiated, several social identities are negotiated, and the in-group and out-group identity principles are changed, altered, though temporarily. So that temporality is very important. The time factor is also very important. But we see the devotional arena as a political arena there in terms of identity politics, in terms of the cultural conditioning that they are trying to disrupt. So reverence is a medium actually for ensuring the subaltern presence and offering some kind of compensation for the historical traumas that they have been subjected to. So this kind of respect, regard, and the bhakti that these people, the upper caste show towards Theyyam is a kind of compensation strategy for ensuring their presence, ensuring that or acknowledging that they are existing there and they're also gods, humans, gods, and then compensating for all the trauma by acknowledging that. Always think about it, most of the time, not most of the time, in all times actually, whenever when we think about atrocities on the Dalit communities, it is perpetrated by the upper caste society or upper class society. So when they are folding their hands, it's a big historical inversion that is happening in terms of that. I again stress, it's quite temporary. It's not permanent. So this ritual becomes a very political articulation of that historical redress that they seek. And now we will look at the concept of Victor Turner's liminality and ritual process, and we'll try to interpret how Theyyam offers that kind of a liminal space. So between all rites of passage, there is this betwixt and between kind of a stage where the ordinary social structure is suspended. The suspension, as I said, in our case might be very for a very fixed time. And the participants exist outside fixed social roles there when it happens. And it's an ambiguous, fluid, transformative kind of space when you think about liminality as a concept. Folklore students and folklore researchers, I'm very sure that you use the concept of liminality very wisely, very interestingly, very constructively. So I'm not going deep into that. We'll just look at it and then come back to the interpretation of Theyyam. So as I said, ritual inversion happens because there is a temporary reversal of hierarchy that we talked about, and the subordinates become symbolically dominating the other upper caste. And the so-called order in the society, there are certain orders in the society that gets destabilized, very interestingly. And power is inverted, but never permanently abolished. So when you look at Foucault's structure of power, it's capillary in nature. Everywhere the power is there. I take examples of a person who works here in our department. He becomes very powerful on the day when he gets when he gets the salary credited into his account. He is a peon here and he drinks and comes. So it is not permitted. Drinking and coming to the campus is not permitted. But actually, nobody questions him at all. He's very powerful on that particular day. I don't know whether that example fits here. Definitely it doesn't fit there, but this is one of my favorite examples about that power hierarchy. All the other days, the professors might be, scolding him for this or that. But that particular day, after his salary day, he comes completely like what we call in Malayalam, using an English word, fit. So completely fit or in fits, whatever way he comes. Completely inebriated, and nobody talks to him on that particular day. Not because they are, everybody fears of their own kind of respect and other things. So nobody talks to him on that particular day. We never know what happens if we speak to him on that particular day because nobody tries that. So there is a big power inversion that is happening, or power shifting that is happening. All the other people who are like sweepers and all are quite powerless on that particular day. Largely women, they're very scared of him shouting at them and all. So this kind of a power inversion is happening, but it is not completely abolished. So when I talk about the capillary nature of power structure that Foucault talks about, I use this particular example because 2 days later everything gets back to the normal thing. He's again a subordinate. People shout at him, and he goes and buys things for us. So it's all coming back to the normal thing. And then for the rest of the 28 days, the power structure remains more or less the same. And then again, the salary day things get changed. So it's a very interesting kind of a power reversal that happens in such a small context. So if you think about your own everyday life, you will see how capillary the power structure is. And when we think about ritual inversion, this becomes all the more sensible to think in that line of capillary power structure. And the communities are different from communities. I'm sure that you know the difference. Intense feeling of social togetherness, for that matter. So I told you about, it's not just about the Theyyams being together. There are several other aspects. I told you that caste within Theyyam is something that is very, very political, that needs a different type of direction in research, which I'm not presenting right now. I'm just thinking through it. Okay. So now the point is about the intensity of that social togetherness. I told you the spectators are also part of that performance. They have to move, they have to make adjustments, they have to be in certain ways when the performance happens, and they all transition into a very different public sphere related to this ritualistic performance. So there is momentary kind of equality beyond any kind of divisions that happen. Doesn't really matter you are a village officer or a collector or someone who's there. Everybody is equal in front of this god. No, in big temples and all, you have special VIP queues and all. That doesn't happen here at all. Whoever you are, doesn't really matter. You are equal. You be the chief minister or the prime minister. There's no particular particular kind of arrangements for you. There is no VIP treatment for anyone at all. So it's largely, when you think about that communitas that is being formed, it's pretty much experiential, and it's not based on the institutional order. So there is, who are part of that community is a very interesting kind of narrative if you think through it. Somebody who experiences the same kind of aesthetic, divine and ritualistic kind of sense, they are forming a communitas together. And there is this notion of structure and anti-structure that is being talked about as part of communities. There is structure which is based on hierarchy, roles, caste, some kind of social order. Whereas anti-structure, it talks about liminality, fluidity, and the kind of inversion that we talked about. So when we think about the ritual, it could mediate between structure and anti-structure. Doesn't mean that it permanently damages the structure and create a new structure. It might be for a transitional period, for a transient period that it happens, and then it goes back. So I told you it doesn't destroy the structure. It just suspends and exposes that there was a structure which is being destroyed. I think that itself is a huge factor, because realizing that there was a structure and there is an inversion of structure on this particular day, or when this performance happens itself, is a big realization that people should take up. Whenever I speak on subjects related to humanities, I keep on thinking about it, and sometimes I even articulate that or think aloud that at the end of it, whatever theories you use, you go with Spivak, you go with Turner, you go with Judith Butler, whoever, whatever post-humanism or blue humanities or whatever theories you use, doesn't really matter. At the end of it, it should be for the kind of purgation that should happen within. So the entire field of humanities work for cultivating certain kind of sentiments, some kind of affects, some kind of such equity and inclusivity principles within. So watching this communitas being formed, watching this structure and anti-structure binaries, or the ritual itself breaking the boundaries and margins, are really fascinating it is very fascinating to witness it, capture it. And I might be pretty emotional if I say that, or you might think of me as an emotional person if I say that it is kind of a life-changing experience. And if you ask me whether people change after that, I'm not very sure about it. But if you think through it, it has a transformation, a transformative kind of potential to purgate certain things, to resolve certain crises that are embedded within us. So that is an affective part of Theyyam, which I'm not going to talk about. We are looking at slightly the ritual aspects, and then the reverence aspect, and the politics of presence as such. So Turner talks about liminality, and he states that liminality implies that the high could not be high all the time unless the low existed. So there is a balancing that happens. Somebody is high because there is a low existing there, and he who is high must experience what it is like to be low. Those justice principles that work. it is very interesting how it comes from a theoretician like Victor Turner, and performer transitions from that laboring body to the divine body. So there is a clear kind of translation that happens, and suspension of everyday caste hierarchy, as I told you already. So the temporary restructuring of power is enforced by this ritual inversion that happens there. And there is the sacred embodiment, which happens as a transformative threshold, which pushes. So somebody who is a normal human being, but then socially segregated or marginalized or subjugated kind of a person, all of a sudden becomes a god. And then that transformative threshold becomes so interesting. And that sacred embodiment or being able to invoke the god is what actually makes the person become that space of negotiation. And liminality allows this impossible kind of an inversion to become, at least momentarily, for real, is something that we need to think about. So now a bit of performativity theory we have to use. I'm not looking at the gender performativity that Butler had talked about, but the iteration or the emphasis on the fact that identity is not something that is pre-existing, but different type of acts, repeated acts should be there to constitute what is considered as identity. This could be contested, but when we think about social categories, the one that I told you as part of the SI theory, social identity theory, like in-group and out-group kind of binaries, when you think about it, it is through repeated kind of iterations that it comes into being. And then that ritualized repetition is very important for such kind of social categories to emerge. So in that sense, being is actually created through doing. So you have to do something to become. So that is the performative aspect that I would like to connect with Theyyam. And the body becomes a site of power. It is never neutral, and it is regulated by norms. It becomes intelligible through the repeated kind of performative acts that these people do. There is a lot of preparation phase for becoming Theyyam. All the other months, they are like free. They are doing whatever they want to do. They are working like anybody else, any other colleagues, but they become very different during these months. They have certain kind of, I wouldn't call it, fasting or anything, but they don't fast. But there are certain kind of lifestyle changes that they make to themselves so that they become capable of this performance. So it's quite like a performative act that they assert their identity and ensure that the power dynamics operate differently. So it's through that embodied kind of repetition that they get their identity established. So as I said, that kind of a recurrence stabilizes the meaning, and the ritualized acts actually produce legitimacy for them. So this seeking of legitimacy is also something that is totally based on the ritual act, and the kind of embodiment of agency that they take is also related to that ritual. So performance can actually reinforce or subvert norms. We know that. And identity and authority are never inherent in this context, because this inversion happens. Even though it's for a temporary period, the inversion happens. So the repeated embodied acts are very much important. And when you think about the deity is not represented. I told you, it's not acting. It is performed into being and becoming. So becoming and being. So there's that process there where the simple human being, after invoking the power, eventually becomes into that, or be the god that he is or she is. I mean, he is invoking. There is only one female Theyyam. I'm not going to talk about that as well. So repetition of ritual acts actually produces that kind of sacred authority. I'm moving on to the finale of this thing. I think I'm good in time, in terms of time. So a repetition of ritual acts actually generates the sacred authority for these people. Again, the temporality is very much there. And their body becomes the site of negotiating power, meaning, and legitimacy, control, regulation. Everything is being negotiated in that majestic body. None of this will make sense until and unless, or may not make much sense or absolute sense until and unless you watch what is this. I might sound very passionate about this. I don't mind agreeing that yes, I'm very passionate about this, because I was a person who was quite fancying about witnessing this one. But only when I witnessed it, I knew how majestic it is, how spectacular it is. And beyond the spectacle, beyond the majesty, there is something else. There is some other kind of deep connecting factor, which is working like the collective unconscious of you, something like an archetype stringing us all together, the entire humanity being strung together by certain archetypes. I never knew that they existed within me, or existed within my partner, or even my 10-year-old child at that point of time. But there were several aspects which connected most of us, three of us in a very different sense, and then with everybody else. I don't know how we could all think about the same thing at the same time. So that is why I said it's easy to say that, okay, Turner said this, Butler said this, there is embodied agency, there is sacred performance, everything else. It's very easy to articulate it that way. But until and unless you watch it, I heard somebody singing yesterday in the afternoon session or evening session. It was fantastic. See, your eyes are witnessing something that you have not seen before. Your ears are listening to some strange language. I'm not talking about yesterday's song, but I'm talking about the kind of diction that Theyyam uses. You are listening to it, and you are trying to decode the meanings of what you have seen and what you have heard, and it creates a very different affective dimension within yourself. And I tell you that there are several archetypal, there are several archetypes that string us all together for, bringing us, or actually forcing us into that bigger fabric that is being created there, or just dragging us into that formation of communities that happen there. Until and unless you witness it, you wouldn't be able to get the essence of what I'm saying. And sometimes, in Sanskrit, there is a word called neti, na iti. It's not this, it's not this. Whenever I say something, I feel like, no, it's not this, na iti, na iti. This is not that. So that, I can simply put in some English words what I feel I should communicate, and that ends there. That my communication becomes so fragile there, and there is nothing that can substitute being a part of that communitas that Theyyam form on that particular, or Theyyam's form on that particular day of performance. So yeah, the ritual iteration is very important, and divinity is constituted through that performative kind of embodiment. And I told you, liminality actually suspends that structure, and performativity produces authority. So that's how we connect it. Okay. And when you think about the ritual space, it enables that reconstitution of identity as such. And when you think about Turner's concept, this is just like, how a teacher of English who has been trained in English literature and language would use the theory to establish everything. I think folk culture and folklore, these are things that we should feel, not theorize much. But we are all into the business of teaching and researching. Therefore, I just thought of connecting it with the architecture of this ritual disruption that Turner would talk about, and Butler's concept of the mechanics of embodied transformation to just spin everything. I mean, just to get everything together, or to thread everything together, whatever I have been talking to you so far. So this sacred transgression, I'll reiterate. When you think about them, the lower caste performer becomes the object of upper caste reverence, and it permits some kind of direct kind of critiquing, fearless speech. Look at it, something that the Constitution guarantees us. The sovereignty, socialism, secularism. I see the preamble of Indian Constitution working very differently. I mean, not differently, very subtly and very politely, very reverently in this context. Everything is so guaranteed, and people are so respectful to each other, very friendly to each other. Some Theyyams are very friendly to us. Some Theyyams have the punishing potential. So we keep, the proximity is very different in that in that enactment as well. So the Shakti invocation, I mean, these are all some theoretical underpinnings that if somebody is interested in looking at it from that, sacred principles, not the profane nature of transgression that people would talk about. And it destabilizes caste hierarchy, and ritual speech becomes a sanctioned form of transgression in that sense. Somebody who is quite revered as someone who has a lot of potential in the society, or somebody who is quite authoritative in the society, all of a sudden folds the hands and stands there, and then the Theyyam calls Magane, son. Okay, the age might be different. There might be several other social dimensions and biological dimensions that wouldn't really let the person call as son. But then everything is transgressed, everything is violated, and that is a sanctioned kind of violation that happens there, or sanctioned kind of crisscrossing of boundaries that happens there. So that is the kind of sacred transgression that happens. And then the temporality of power, we have already talked about the subaltern agency and how it works as a historical kind of compensation for all the, or remedies for, not remedies, compensation for all the traumas the society inflicted upon the marginalized community. So wronged women, martyred heroes, victims of caste justice, all of them come there and make us look back, because there will be a lot of storytelling happening. I told you that the communities are very interesting. The community that it forms is very interesting, because they are also participating in it. They're not putting the makeup on, they're not doing the choreography, but they're sitting there and narrating the story. So that community building is also very interesting, where we repeatedly think about the injustices that the society had infiltrated, and the kind of rejuvenation in terms of rights and responsibilities and everything else. So there is a sort of purgation that happens in everybody's mind. How it sustains is very different. How it translates you as a better individual works differently. Maybe you should go back to the Freudian tripartition of psyche, where the ego, superego. If you're an ego-based person, maybe a lot more potential to move to superego. I'm not very sure about it, but it functions very differently. And then I'm just concluding it. Ritual remembrance functions as counter history. There, the marginalized do not merely appear, but they return as divine. So that a returning possibility, if you do something, there is a return possibility of it, whether it is violence or silence or blessing, that is different. But the major principle is about, I am wronged, I've now become a god, and do I punish you or do I purgate you? This is a very big moral question that Theyyam pose, and we need to really think about it if you want to cultivate that fine sensibilities that would make you more humane than being more human. So it performs the history from below. There is a concept of history from below, which I wrote about in some articles. It's a very interesting kind of concept, whose history is being narrated, and how people who are powerless or who are oppressed narrate their history. That is not being said in the major historical part, right? So it's a very different way of performing this history from below. And it is through sacred inscription that they do that, in a sense. So it's seasonal and temporary, as we said, and it lasts only briefly. And the social hierarchy, as I said, it goes back to the old order. And then again, the reversal happens. So it's like seasons. One season comes, and then again you will see that mythical kind of transience there, right? The power is, so look at every single myth that we have got. Take any kind of myths. Let's take Mahabharata, let's take the Ramayana, let's take the Iliad, Odyssey, whichever. There are this, they can be connected to the nature, actually. So one season takes over, the other one moves away. The story of Vali and Tara and Sugriva, the story of Ram, Sita, and Ravana. Everything has got something to do with the seasons. Ram is from the sun side, and Sita is from the earth, and then Ravana is the one who who lives in Lanka, which is surrounded by waters. So sun, water, earth, and then, or maybe the rain season you can imagine, the monsoon you can imagine. So one season takes up earth or snatches earth, and then the other season snatches it back. Some kind of a mythical, this was talked about by one of the, somebody might have written about it, but I read it from Dr. M. Leelavati, who had a very beautiful article on how myths are representative of different seasons. So your reading of Macbeth will also be, or your reading of Hamlet will also be influenced by such kind of mythical interpretations of seasons and all, or seasons taking over the earth and all. So such kind of connecting factors are there, which you can read through this temporality of power and that sacred transgression that happens for a quick time. So power circulates, it is capillary, but it is not a permanent shift. So now we will look at the last concept and wind it up. The presence is not symbolic. It is actually an embodied present. As I said, the visibility, voice, and reverence, everything together actually make a political articulation possible. So in that sense, the ritual body of Theyyam becomes the archive, a kind of negotiation space where, where it can function as a tribunal and a public sphere as well. So it stages the political presence, it stages the politics of presence, and it is mediated through, and the medium is that ritualistic practice, a lot of reverence, the ritual practice which earns them a lot of reverence as well. So it creates that liminal rupture. Embodiment produces that kind of agency, as I said before. And the counter public space is something that enables the articulation or the questioning, the thought seeds will be given into your head through those questions, and the subaltern memory becomes some kind of a sacred authority, and it transitions as well. It comes to our mind as well, as I told you before. How humane I should be. Should I be just a human being, or should I be humane? Those kind of philosophical questions are also being posed by these practices. Power is inverted, as I said, but only for a limited time period. So it's not merely a ritual performance. You can't call it just a ritual performance. There is a sacred reconfiguration of their presence within structures, which would not be practical otherwise. So there is a seasonal inversion of hierarchy. There is a seasonal inversion of authority and legitimacy given to them. And the questions, the space for dialogues, the space for interaction, which otherwise would not be there. It's just like in several what is that? The street plays and all. You can ask a lot of questions there. It will be considered as art. There won't be many censorship issues there. But you may not be able to articulate those things. So you can put your words in a third person's mouth and then articulate the same thing, where you're very powerless about it. Here, the individual is deriving power through iterative acts of performativity, and ritual becomes a medium which is very conducive for channeling those questions, those moral critiquing, which would never have been possible if that ritual wasn't there, if it couldn't fetch the kind of reverence that it could get. So we need to understand that though there are several different nuances that we didn't discuss today, it is a ritualistic kind of performance that enables ourselves, even the communities, even the people who are onlookers or spectators, to look within us, look at the kind of insecurities that we have, look at the society and the way in which we participated in several kind of aggressions, be it microaggressions, be it the bigger ones, be it violence. It is asking us to look at us, whether we have wronged people. Is there a possibility of the wronged ones to come back high in power? So you look at it, it's pretty much philosophical. It enables us, this particular performance and witnessing it enables us to question our own morality, our own ethical integrity, and our own participation in generating a culture, either in an inclusive way in an equitable way, or it criticizes or it enables us to look back at our participation in perpetrating different types of crimes, whether it is micro, macro, or meso. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karthika. Thank you. It was wonderful.
Thank you
Aaleya.
so much.
Um,
The platform is open now for question and answer session, though we are falling short of time.
Sorry
uh,
about that.
should I just
No,
conclude
no,
it
no, no.
quickly?
Yeah, it's a so much wonderful way to start today.
Yes.
What a take, you have from counter public to beautifully knitting Turner into the phenomena. It's so wonderful, Karthika. I really appreciate it, and you should publish it.
I will try.
Otherwise, I will ask the same question: Do this purgate me or punish me? So you should not punish us. You should publish it.
I will.
Okay, I'm putting publish in between the purgation and punishing. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
I
much.
would just like to, ma'am, thank you for this wonderful, insightful talk. And ma'am has touched upon multiple aspects of Theyyam, which opens up new avenues for research. And obviously, few questions emerge for discussions and further deliberations. I'll just quickly conclude it so that, it helps the researchers to think about it. So, ma'am, you talked about how Theyyam can be understood or seen as a cathartic ritual for processing collective Dalit or Muslim trauma, right? So researchers can, further research on that. And ma'am, you also talked about the sacred presence, the sacred groove. So one question emerge over here is how Theyyam's sacred groove setting intersect with the environmental ethics. So that, again. And you also talked about the social irony. So few questions, again, important ones that emerge over here is how Theyyam crosses religious and caste boundaries through their performances. And another one would be how do female coded Theyyams, like Bhadrakali you talked about, negotiate patriarchal norms through narrative of feminine rage, right? And you also talked about counter publics. So again, so this important one. And you talked about liminality, ritual process. So another question emerged over here is how the performer's transformation exemplify liminality as a site of anti-structural communitas, right? So we have a lot of questions that are that we are taking home from your talk.
Thank you so
And
much.
now I'd request the people to ask ma'am if they have any questions or any comments. And I personally have one query, if you may, if you ask. There was another, I was reading somewhere in Karnataka, there's another kind of ritual of Bhuta Kola, right? Bhuta Kola. Is there any similarities in these two rituals?
Yes, there are similar things. Even Panjuruli is a Theyyam that is performed in Kannur as well. But the rituals are different. So what you see in Kantara film, that is also an animal Theyyam. If you look at it, it's a worshipping practice for pigs, So here there are several different animals being worshipped, and the ritual codes are very different. The myths might be different as well. So it's an entire story to narrate. We don't have time for that, but just understand that they are similar in certain ways, but different in terms of makeup, different in terms of choreography, different in terms of the stories that we say there. But the power concept is pretty much similar to that. It's about the animal worship that people do and all. So many intricate features are there, but there are similarities. Very, very few similarities, but differences are more in terms of that.
I will say twins born in two wombs.
Yes, you captured it. Yes.
Any question? Any comment?
I just wanted to play a video For those people who haven't watched it, it's not the best one, but I'll just paste it in the chat box. So
Debelina has the question. Debelina.
Yeah,
Debelina.
Debelina has a question.
First of all, thank you, ma'am. It
Thank
is
you.
always a treat to listen to you. And it was an intriguing presentation. So much to learn from your presentation. I was just I was just thinking about when you were talking about being Theyyam. So it's not an act. It's not an act, but it's being. The performance becomes a process of being. So I was also thinking about in Bengal. I was thinking about Chopul Bhaduri, who as he played Chopul Rani. He became Chopul Rani when he was part of the Notto company, and he used to play the role of Shitala goddess. And it was he who said, and I had the opportunity to had a telephonic conversation with him once a long back, and he said that it is also for him a process of being. It is no more an acting. The moment, and as you were showing it through your presentation, that the performer is looking at the mirror and then he recognizes then that he is now the god. So he too had that feeling, as he said once, that the moment he looked at the mirror after he had dressed up as the goddess, that was this process of being. My question is, when it comes to Theyyam, ma'am, do they have any this process of training as to this being? I mean, say the first performance of Theyyam. I mean, I don't have the knowledge, so I just wanted to know if there is any process.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I understood. So I was also curious about it, whether they get any practice sessions. See, for example, if we have to do a dance performance or a singing performance, there'll be rehearsals. There are no such rehearsals. It is a practice that people in their community, in that particular, see, for example, there was a person who used to be the Theyyam performer, and his son, his daughter, his entire family is into that. They all know about it. They all know about it. There is no training that happens, and usually they just do a little bit of strengthening kind of exercises as their daily life practice. That's that. Other than that, there is no rehearsal that goes in. There is no practice that goes in, and that is the intriguing aspect of it. Actually, very very interesting kind of a thing, because when you click on this link, if you click on it, you will see a lot of other videos coming there as well, and you will be wondering how much strength do they have, because they are just attaching a lot of fire sticks on their body, and they're twirling and twisting and running and jumping into the fire and coming back and all. Where do they get this strength? That possession state is uncontrollable. Nobody can control them. There is a lot of prediction that goes into some aspect. Okay, somebody is just running over the coconut tree, which is slightly leaning. So the Theyyam, just Mapla Theyyam, I think, the Muslim Theyyam, just runs over that. And from there it jumps. Bapirian, yes, exactly. So it just goes up and then comes down. You think about it, how fascinating it is to see. But then there is an aftermath of it. Nobody is prepared for that, actually. That's where I just subtly mentioned that, beyond every performance and everything else, when the transients fade away, they come back to their human self. And the humans have bonds and everything else. It gets damaged. Their lifespan becomes very shortened and all. These are facts that not many people would look at, and very sad kind of stories they'll be telling us. So there is no rehearsal. There is no performance practice. They imbibe it from their ancestors or their fathers or forefathers, and then they practice it. The position state, the mirror that the person was holding, I was looking at it 15 minutes before he took it. There's nothing I can see. I just see my face. There is no specific kind of mirror that is being designed for that purpose also. It's just a plastic box kind of mirror, and person looks at it and then immediately he becomes Theyyam. I didn't become Theyyam. So there is something that is quite like a penance that they take up, quite like dedication that they have towards that that cultural practice and ritualistic order that they are born into. So no rehearsals, no practice. It's their general kind of life that they lead. I wouldn't say that they go to gym and have that kind of building up kind of thing, nothing at all. It's so difficult to witness them doing that, but then there is something comes over us. It's just like amazing. You have to watch that.
Just want to add one thing.
Fascinating.
Excuse
Thank
me.
you, ma'am. Thank you. It's
Just want to add one thing. They train in Kalari actually. There's
Yes,
the Kalari training they have.
that is there. They
And as well as the singing part, the totem part also.
the literature part they get trained.
Literature
The kind of articulation, totem part, and there are some more such kind of things that they get there, because that is kind of like oral transmission that is there.
Yeah.
Kalari, yes, but not everyone. I think I interviewed quite a few people. Some of them don't have that, but it is again that strengthening kind of thing. Yes.
Karthika, it is the same thing. Being to becoming. In shorter place, they use the Vellate, then they'll use something like it's a gradual progression. I really want from Debolina, I'm taking this being becoming idea. You can work on that Naveen Kishore's documentary on Chappal Badri.
Yes,
You must watch,
yes,
yeah. You must watch, Karthika. That's a beautiful. He's one of the greatest actor I have ever seen. I haven't seen him originally live, but he's the greatest actor, Chappal Badri or Chappal Rani. It's a Naveen Kishore has a very interesting docu film. It's in YouTube. I think it's YouTube. No? I think it's there.
it is there, and it's a Seagull production.
Yeah, it's a
And
Seagull production. Yeah,
And
I forgot the
recently
name.
there is a book. Recently, there is a book written by Shondeep Ray on Chappal Baduri.
Oh, I
And
don't know.
And he took the book to Chappal Baduri, and Chappal Baduri right now is, I mean, he can't get up really. He's not that fit right now. So as he saw the book, his reaction was, I had the opportunity to see the video, and the moment he saw the book of 500 pages, his first reaction was in Bangla, Pasho Pata, and he couldn't think of it. Somebody would actually document his life in this manner. This is a recent book published in Kolkata Literary Meet by Shondeep Ray on Chappal Baduri.
Oh, that's good. Okay, we will wind it up. I'm so sorry to interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the question. Thank you.
It was so wonderful. It was so wonderful. Wonderful presentation.
Thank you
There's
so much.
meta theatrical also.
Learn from
You're
you.
there.
Exactly.
You're there with the slide.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference. I have to travel today, but I'll be joining whenever I can. Thank you so much. Lots of love to all of you, and enjoy the rest of the sessions. Thank you so much, Jolly sir. It was so wonderful to be with you. Aaleya ma'am, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye.
So we are moving forward to our next session.
So sorry we cut across some time, but it was so intriguing.
Yes.
So fascinating. So she prepared so well, and I have after
Yes,
a
sir.
long time I'm listening to such a lecture where the theory Turner has been beautifully used, so beautifully used in beautiful.
In fact, sir, she touched upon so many areas. I mean, raising so many questions.
Yeah,
Exactly. I mean, there are so many questions that the young, researchers can take away home.
Yes,
Absolutely,
and one can go on with, discussions after ma'am's lecture.
Absolutely. Okay. Sorry. Sorry.
Yes, continue.
Yeah.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
All right. So a very good morning to one and all present here. I am Nehanok Tombam, and I am your anchor for this session. And we are joined here today by our reporter, Devasri, and our technical assistant, Ruji. And it is my absolute privilege to introduce our chairperson for this session, Dr. Urvasi Mohinani.